So in this part 2 of the video, we'll be going through blocking out concept art, blocking out our shapes, our general shapes, based on this concept art / 3D model reference that we have. Once again, it's not my own. This is made by Dave Hansan, and I'm just using this as a reference to sort of challenge myself to make this a trim texture. So for the concept art, which you guys seen last week or in the last so-called part 1, this is part 2 of it. You guys must have seen the plan that we made. So we sort of made our plan, and we started saying, okay, we're going to start with Maya, then go to ZBrush, Painter and stuff. So now we'll be working with Maya and Photoshop and ZBrush for today. Okay, so after you guys plan this out, the next step is to sort of block it out with Maya based on concept art. So what I have over here is a blocking that are very easily made in Maya, right? So they are very simple shapes. They're pretty easy to make, and yeah, so you can use instancing to sort of reuse objects. You don't have to recreate objects again and again. So you can duplicate special using Maya's instance feature, so that if you change something, it will change the other parts, right? And make sure in your outliner. So let's say, for example, you can sort of see these guys are just flipped over, right? They just sort of rotated, scaled down, and flipped over the other side. We're not really concerned about the objects that are coming outside. We'll be cutting them later when we have our final meshes. For now, we just want to focus on the proportion, the scale, and the size, getting that accurate first, right? So our main object in this case are these 3 lines, and with this cylindrical shape. Generally, a note for some of you guys, if you're unaware, now I did this mistake over here, but generally it'd be nice if whenever you guys are creating a cylinder, make sure the cylinder is it has a horizontal and a vertical line. Okay, so normally your values of 8, usually values of 4 rather, usually work pretty well, right? So let's say if you see 4, you'll have the lines horizontal and vertical, right? If you go to 8, so you'll see that those line does retain, right? And I usually like to go around with these values, or value range of 4, so that anything within this range is pretty nice, so that at any given point in time I can delete half, I can delete quarter, and I can mirror this as many times as I want, right? Now of course you cannot, you have more segments if you really want to divide it in that way as well, but at least this gives you a nice starting point to sort of start off in your cylindrical shape, right? So that's generally the blocking. So it's not too hard to make this, as long as you understand basic shapes, sizes, and proportion. I think that's the main aim for this, to getting that right. Okay. After we do this in Maya, what I usually do is I start blocking out the trim. This object we are only going to use trims, well, and 2 other tileable textures, but generally focusing more on the trim workflow that we want to aim for. So what we have over here is, based on these proportions and sizes, we can sort of get an understanding of how our trims will be, and once again based on our concept that we sort of made, or plan, or 2D plan that we made. Okay, so what I did over here was I already pre-made this one. So in the next video I'll show a time lapse of this, but in other words, this one is just a very simple cube. All these are just basic cubes separated out, right? Now of course the size doesn't matter in this case. Preferably have the size touching the grids, right? Never really don't sort of do these kind of stuff where, let's say, the ending of these borders are somewhere halfway around the grid line, right? That's not advisable from my point of view, right? So one thing that you guys need to take note for trims usually work with squares, right? Because textures are power of 2, and power of 2 in this case Usually texture maps in Maya or any other 3D applications are squares. So in our case, this has to be a square. And based on the plan that we made, we sort of roughed it out this way. Okay. Now what I did was, after I made this in Maya, so you can make this from a simple plane, you can multi-cut, you can extract the faces, you can bevel the edges. So in this case, I have a segment, 2 segments over here, right? And this is my blocking, right? So what we want to achieve in this blocking is sort of the ratio, proportion, and size based on our concept part, and of course based on the model that we just showed you earlier, which is the blocking itself, right? So you want to emphasize that these are the proportions that we took from those other places, right? Now of course some of these things may be slightly too big, but in terms of optimization, I think it's fairly okay to say that this is fine, right? Even though I would rather, maybe increase the scale a bit, but I think this is fine for now, for this piece. Okay. So after we're done with the blocking, what we need to do is we need to high-res this out, right? And I like to directly jump into ZBrush to high-res things out. So what I did was I selected this, I file, export selection, and then I exported this out as a OBJ or an FBX, right? So in this case, you guys can work with either FBX files or you can export as OBJ. Both are fine. In this case, OBJs are something like the JPEGs for a 3D asset. FBX, you can think of it like a PNG of a 3D asset. In general terms, FBX contains more data. OBJ is just a very simple, one of the most basic forms of 3D, right? So in this case, I'll just export an OBJ, just save it to ZBrush, and here I already have this trim blocking 1, right? So I'll just export it again. I'll just export selected, right? Once we're done with this, once we're done with blocking itself, we can move on to ZBrush, right? So this is our blocking for proportion, scale, and size. I just combine all of them together so that in ZBrush I get one asset, and my next step would be importing this to ZBrush directly. Okay, so in ZBrush what I have is I already imported this one, so I took the liberty to import this guy, and what we have over here is we have this one single BJ mesh, right? That's something like this. Now of course I have my own shortcuts over here, but talking about ZBrush, hopefully you guys know ZBrush. Maybe in the future, if I have time, I'll make some tutorials about ZBrush. But generally what you're going to do now is we want to sort of split them out into polygroups, right? And work our way through this, right? Now how do I actually get this, right? So going back to Maya, right, before I move on, right, how do I actually sort of get this piece, or what did I exactly do is inside of Photoshop, right, once I sort of get the proportion, scale, and size, inside of Photoshop, what I have is I have another document referring to what my plan is going to be like, right, how my plan is going to be. So of course, this definitely comes after my general blocking is done for the entire environment. So once this blocking is done, you guys can either move on to this 3D object, right, you can screenshot this one, and you can take this to Photoshop, plan it out, or plan it out in Photoshop and then plan it in 3D. It's really up to you guys what you guys want to do. But my point is, as long as you guys get the proportion, scale, and size correctly, everything else will work work fine from that point onwards. Okay, so once again I repeat, this is the blocking for the entire set. From this set we get the proportion, scale, and size. From there we can either make this blocking in Maya, right, or we can plan it out in Photoshop, our proportion, scale, and size. From there we sort of color code them, right? So what I have over here is I have some names, right? These names referring to the 3 different types of gold. So I have some curved, damage, dirty, gold mid version 2. So these are just different naming conventions I set out for myself based on what I think is required for this sort of trim. Right, the 3 different types of rocks, right? Simple, medium, big cracks, right? Some design stones, right? Based on what we thought of early on. And then based on a ball, right, there will be some circular patterns around this area. Now, of course, later on in the future videos, you guys will see I did change one of these guys later on. I did change the star that I added over here, which wasn't really a good idea when it came to circular stuff. It's sort of distorting, but we'll see how we fix that later on, right? So the centerpiece, as my masterpiece is right here. Drew this as a centerpiece. Two different sort of triangle shapes. So these guys are based on this one, right? So that's this piece, and these two different patterns are based on those guys over there, right? So that's like a sun shape, that's like a moon shape. So we have a sun and a moon shape sort of object over here, which will be with alpha cut out. I also drew out a alpha map, right? So in this case, so it'll be white, that'll be white. So white means visible, black means invisible. Okay. I also drew out a two different type of tile textures. So one is just for preview. Of course, this is a rock download from online kind of feature, and I just changed the color of this and made this gold. So it's exactly the same thing. I just wanted to preview this inside Maya. Right? So inside of Maya, all I had to do was just come in and sort of preview this guy out. Right? So inside of Maya, what I did with these guys is, of course, I just plan a map from top, so it's not really a big thing, right? So UVs are just completely flat, right? There's sort of one flat piece of UV, which is taking forever to load. As usual, Maya takes its sweet time. Right, there we are. Wow, that took forever. Okay, so what we have over here is you can just see this is just a planar map. This is how the UVs are. Planar map means they are just planar map from the top. So you can see this one is just from the y-axis with keep image and width height. So I'll get the correct proportion and scale and size. Right. So we sort of did this and we sort of applied this texture throughout our entire geometry. Right. And of course you can go back and forth with this. So I was going back and forth with Photoshop and Maya. Sadly I did not record it, but these are the things that we need to sort of take note of, right? So maybe big rocks over here, maybe these, let's say for example these pieces. You see these are the rock simple, the rock medium less. So some things are big, some things are small, but generally it's pretty okay, right? For these faces later on I did use a different UV set, but that doesn't matter at this point. Okay, so what we can see is we can see a beautiful patterns over here, right? So these are all separated out one by one. So I extract these guys one by one, right? And you know it's pretty nice for blocking. Okay, so it makes sense. So you can either go to Photoshop, back to Maya, Photoshop, back to Maya, and readjust based on size. Okay. For this video, I did later on in the future, I did have to squeeze these guys in because the proportion and ratio wasn't really quite right. This was a bit too fat, but small things like this are fine to adjust, and you know they're pretty okay. Okay, so once again, you take this to ZBrush, right, and then you can start high-resing it out. Okay, now of course in ZBrush there are many things that you can do. So for example, in this case, polygroups are one of them. So in this case, I can auto group and I can split them out. Right? So for example, I can split out these guys. I can group split them. I can apply my texture that I have right on these guys, so that you know I don't have to worry about anything. Right? I can just import my texture over here, and I'll be fine. Right, from Photoshop. Okay, which I did do later on. Right, and so right now what I'll do is I'll just do a very simple group split. Okay, and that'll split out into various subtools. Now I can go ahead and rename these subtools, but for now I'm just going to go with this. Okay. After this, one of the most important features that I want to talk about is, in this case, would be symmetry, using symmetry inside of ZBrush, right? And the other mode, which is, or the other tool mainly involved with trim textures, is this wrap mode. How do both of them work? Well, firstly, to start off with, in ZBrush, whenever we have this object, we sort of need to Dynamesh, right? To sort of we start off something, right? So I always like to Dynamesh with symmetry on, right? So that it generally just creates this equalized surface. If not, I can always come into modify topology and mirror left to right, right? If that doesn't work out, right? So my point is, sometimes even with ZBrush, you will end up having problems in the corners, right? Now we can avoid them as much as we can, but when it comes to sculpting, we get lost in sculpting. We tend to push it, slightly too far or slightly too less, right? Okay, and of course with symmetry, there's another problem that comes with the design remains exactly the same. Right? So let's say we have the design remains exactly the same. So symmetry is not really the best solution all the time, right? What if we want some variety? What then? So in that case, we have this option called underneath our brush option, right? We have this option named underneath curve, right? This underneath curve. We have this wrap mode. So what you can do is, what wrap mode does is it's sort of based on your brush size, will based on your brush as well. So let's say, for example, clay buildup, right? If I sculpt over here, you can see that it's continuing over there, right? So let's say I switch off symmetry, and if I see this, I can sort of see that yes, it is continuing, but it's not super perfect, right? There are some limitations to this sort of wrap tool, but at least what we get is we get some kind of continuation, right? The object seems the brush stroke seems to be continuing to the other side, right? And there are different types of wrap modes. So wrap mode 1 is just a single left to right. Wrap mode 2 is sort of a tile version of it, so just wraps twice, right? So we wouldn't really want to use that in this case, right? So you'll see then it's tiling twice, then 1, 2, right? 2 more times, one in the corners and one in the center, right? So in this case, we're going to use wrap mode number 1, which wraps around the corners. But you see, this is not perfect, so be careful using this tool, right? For me, in my case, I did end up going back to Photoshop to touch up the edges because I did mess it up halfway along the way. And I think it's just natural that happens, and as long as you can fix it with small issues, I mean, it's a small issue as long as you can fix it later on. Okay, so these are the most two things I always start off with. One is Dynamesh, right? After Dynamesh, sometimes I like to mirror and weld. After mirror and weld, what I'll do is I'll make sure that my brush, on every single brush that I have, whether move brush, whether clay buildup, whether damp standard, trim dynamic, pinch, or a default standard brush, I make sure that my wrap mode is always on 1, because sometimes I'll forget it. Okay, and always, let's say for example, if we ever make a mistake, okay, if we ever sculpt with wrap mode as 0 and there's no more symmetry, right? What we can do is we can sort of use this option called Smart Resim, okay, which is underneath your deformation tab. Okay, call this Smart Resim. Right now, by default, if you click on it, it'll sort of take right to left, right, to just resymmetry it. Okay, now this is similar to mirror and weld, right? But let's say you want to take this side to the other side. What you can do is we can mask that out, and then we can Smart Resim. Okay, so what I'll do is that I will take any information from here and throw it to the other side. Okay? What if we want this information to go to the other side? We just mask this out and then Smart Resim, right? So we can do this for the border edges in case, let's say for example, one of these guys are gone far away, right? So we can do this for, let's say, this piece, and you can Smart Resim. But as you can see, there are some limitations to this. For example, this will not unsmooth it back, right? So in that case, we'll have to take it all the way until here, right? So we have to mask it all the way until there, and then Smart Resim. Okay, so these tools are pretty handy, right? Smart Resim, geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld, right? All these tools are very important, especially for mirroring, right? Symmetry. So symmetry option is shortcut. The shortcut key is X. So X is by default For symmetry, you can find that over here. The wrap mode also is useful, right, based on every single brush that we have, right? And we can always start sculpting based on whatever the object is, right? And also, of course, if I remind myself, I can always import as a texture map my object. Okay, so let's say in this case I have this object, Photoshop, come to this guy, export this guy out as a JPEG, right? Plan 01, save it, and then maybe what will help me now is just for you guys, just in case. Right, so what I can do is I can merge visible with the UVs. I'll take a new guy, and then I can come in to this texture map and I can apply the texture that I want. So I have this trim texture, span, right? So I have this guy over here. Now it is flipped in this case because ZBrush always imports flip textures for whatever weird reason. I can't believe they still have it this way. So we can just come in, flip V, and then come into this guy, change this. Right? So then that'll be fine. Except our center guy, who is somewhere around there. Let's say we append him. Of course, his topologies must be lost, but that's okay. I mean, he's still fine. He's still the way he is, right? And we can always get him back by merging it again and getting a second guy. There you go, perfect. Right, so with this we can come in, and then we can come in and split based on a texture, and then we'll all be happy. Right, so I can auto groups and I can group split. Okay, and yeah, there we go. That's how you guys can sort of see the polypane, provided there is a texture that's common. Now of course I think I have to go through one by one in this case. ZBrush doesn't like what I did, but anyway, that's the idea. As long as you guys understand, it's all okay. Okay, yeah, I think that should be it. For the next video, we'll have a time lapse of modeling it out. Now, of course, I haven't recorded a video in Photoshop, but this is the idea, right? There's nothing much to record in this case, right? But this is the idea, creating it from scratch, based on the lines that I drew early on. So I did show you guys last time. I sort of did plan it out in this case based on this, right? And that's the same idea as creating this, right? And then Maya, I come in and I sort of model this out based on the size and proportion, just to see whether it works right or not. Only if this one works right, then I'll go ahead and make this piece. Okay, so it does take a bit of time sometimes, but it's always good because you don't want to go in and change your texture again. So I would suggest do take time to spend some time in the blocking itself, and you will never regret it. Okay, so that'll be it, and that's it for the second part of the video. It's a very short one. So generally, once again, Photoshop, Maya, ZBrush, and start sculpting. So happy sculpting. Yay. Beautiful. Alright, see you next time. Bye.